England's streets are being run from the shadows. Beneath the surface of everyday life, ruthless gangs control drug empires, ignite turf wars, and spill blood without warning. These aren't stories from decades ago. This is happening right now. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 most dangerous and active gangs operating in England today. From organized networks controlling international drug routes to brutal street crews that turn neighborhoods into war zones, this is the real face of modern gangland Britain. We'll break down who they are, how they operate, and why they're feared. This is raw, this is current, and this is just the start, and it's closer than you think. Let's get into it, starting with number 10. Our countdown begins in Liverpool with the Croxith Crew, a notorious street gang that has terrorized the Croxith area for years. The Croxith Crew gained national infamy in 2007 when an 11-year-old boy, Rhys Jones, was tragically shot dead in the crossfire of their gang feud, a crime that shocked Britain. The gang's origins trace back to the 1990s and 2000s in the tough Croxteth neighborhood of Liverpool. Comprised mostly of local youths, they built a reputation through drug dealing and violent turf wars. Their chief rivals are the Strand Gang from neighboring Norris Green, and clashes between the two groups have repeatedly turned residential streets into battlegrounds. That rivalry, often called the Croxith Crew versus Strand Gang War, became well publicized after a series of tit-for-tat shootings. Despite crackdowns, both gangs continue to operate in some form. In fact, Merseyside police estimate as many as 120 different gangs are active around Merseyside in 2023, a testament to the persistent gang culture in the city. In recent years, the Croxith Crew's activities have centered on the local drug trade and county lines operations, shipping drugs to smaller towns. Their members have been implicated in shootings and assaults as they defend their turf. The murder of Rhys Jones, as well as the more recent 2022 killing of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell by a gang-related gunman, underscore the extreme violence plaguing Liverpool's gang scene. Community outrage over innocent children being caught in gang crossfire has led to new police task forces and dozens of arrests in the city. Even so, the Croxteth Crew and similar Liverpool gangs, such as the East Side Boys, Wavo 420 and others, remain entrenched. They engage in drug dealing and gun violence on a scale that keeps Liverpool among the UK's most dangerous cities for gang activity. Law enforcement's evolve operations and targeted raids have yielded firearm seizures and mass arrests, but the cycle of gang retribution continues. As we start our list at number 10, the Croxteth Crew exemplifies the kind of street-level gang whose brutal turf feuds have left a dark mark on their community, and who, despite public fury and police pressure, persist into 2025 as a looming threat in Liverpool's underworld. Coming in at number 9 is the Peekom Boys, a multi-generational gang from the Peekom district of South London. Active since the 1990s, this gang, also known at times as the Black Gang, has grown into one of London's most notorious street crews. The Peekom Boys built their empire on drug trafficking, armed robbery, and violent enforcement. By the 2000s, they were feared across the capital, engaged in brutal turf wars with rivals like the Ghetto Boys of nearby Brixton and other South London gangs. In fact, Peekom's feud with Brixton's gangs raged for over 20 years, involving shootings and stabbings that turned parts of South London into virtual war zones. These conflicts gave rise to the area's reputation for extreme gang violence, one that persists today in new forms. The Peekom Boys are somewhat unique in that they've also had a cultural impact. Members of the gang helped popularize British road rap, a gritty precursor to drill music, in the 2000s. However, authorities accused their music of glorifying crime and inciting violence. As older leaders became incarcerated or moved on, younger sets emerged under new names, most famously the Zone 2 crew, effectively a modern branch of the Peekom Boys. Zone 2 continued the legacy of violence, engaging in a vicious feud with a Camberwell-based gang called Moscow 17. This postcode war led to tit-for-tat killings, including the stabbing of drill rapper Sadiq Incognito Kamara, a Moscow 17 member, in 2018. In that feud, each side released taunting diss tracks, bragging about stabbings and promising revenge, a chilling example of gang rivalry playing out in both the streets and social media. Police responded by banning certain drill music videos and increasing patrols, but the violence proved difficult to contain. Zone 2, Peekom members have been linked to multiple murders and shootings in the past 5 years, as they fought rivals in a bid to control lucrative drug markets in South London. Today, the Peekom Boys remain a serious threat. They continue to control drug territories around Peekom, SE15, and neighbouring areas like Woolworth and Camberwell. Their structure has evolved, more fragmented cells, often teenage and young adult members, equipped with knives and firearms. Turf and Pride are fiercely protected with machetes and guns. Recent high-profile incidents include daylight stabbings, drive-by shootings, and violent clashes in public places. One gang fight in 2021 spilled into a shopping centre, terrifying onlookers. The Metropolitan Police's gang units keep Peekom on their radar, and several known members are currently serving long prison terms for murder and weapons offences. Yet the gang regenerates with new recruits. The Peekom Boys' long history, coupled with their ongoing involvement in deadly feuds and drug crime, cements their place among England's most dangerous gangs in 2025. Authorities and community leaders in Southwark live in a state of vigilance, acutely aware that this South London gang's name still carries a very real threat on the streets. At number 8 is a gang that has quickly earned a reputation for extreme violence and organisation. The Marley Boys, based in Waltham Forest, East London. Formed around 2015 and named in reference to its founders' Somali heritage, the Marley Boys, aka Marley Strip, are the most business-driven, violent and ruthless street gang in their area, according to a Waltham Forest Council report. In just a few years, they rose from a local crew to a dominant force, controlling drug markets in Leighton and Walthamstow, postcodes E10 and E17. Their business is drug trafficking, notably heroin and crack cocaine, and they run a network of county lines that extend their drug sales to towns outside London. The gang is known to recruit and groom children as young as early teens to act as couriers and dealers, exploiting vulnerable youth in a bid to expand profits. What truly sets the Marley Boys apart is their propensity for unrestrained violence. The gang is heavily armed and has been linked to numerous stabbings, shootings, and acid attacks in its turf wars. They operate with a paramilitary level of ruthlessness, willing to attack rivals in broad daylight and even target innocent individuals mistaken for enemies. In a 2018 turf war, Marley Boys members were involved in the gruesome murder of a 14-year-old boy, Jaden Moody, who was rammed off a moped and stabbed to death on a Leighton street, mistaken as a rival. This act sent shockwaves through London. Their primary rivals have been the Hyam Hill or Priory Court gang from a neighbouring estate. A cycle of retaliation between these groups escalated between 2017 and 2018. A Marley Boys member, Elijah Dornelly, was stabbed to death. In revenge, Marley Boys associates killed 2 young men, Kachem Mokrane and Joseph Williams Torres, in late 2017 and early 2018. These murders were planned by the Marley Boys' ringleader, Hamza ul Haq, as payback for Dornelly's death. Ul Haq fled the country, but was eventually captured. In 2023, he and several accomplices were convicted, and ul Haq was ordered to serve a minimum of 36 years in prison. The Marley Boys' leadership being taken down was a major win for police, yet the gang remains active. It had a structured hierarchy and sub-gangs, like DM, Drive and Marlow Crew, feeding into it. They enforce their rule through fear. Knives and machetes are their calling cards, and they have shown a willingness to use firearms as well. Unlike some gangs, the Marley Boys shun flashy social media presence, preferring anonymity to avoid detection. They even monitor law enforcement on platforms like Facebook, staying a step ahead. Despite heavy police focus, including the 2019 takedown of a major Marley Boys drug line and the aforementioned murder convictions, the gang's drug operations continue to regenerate. East Londoners in Walthamstow live under the shadow of this gang's legacy of bloodshed. The Marley Boys exemplify a new generation of British street gang, tech-savvy, profit-motivated and utterly violent and ruthless in protecting their trade. Their presence in 2025 is a stark reminder of how quickly a local gang can evolve into one of England's most dangerous criminal organisations. In the ganglands of Birmingham, 2 names have dominated for decades: the Burger Bar Boys and the Johnson Crew. These two gangs, ranked together at number 7, were once bitter rivals whose turf war turned Birmingham into a conflict zone in the early 2000s. Originating in the inner-city neighbourhoods of Handsworth and Aston, the Johnson Crew, based in Johnson's estate, and the Burger Bar Boys, named after a Soho Road burger bar hangout, were initially small street gangs in the 1990s. But by the 2000s, they had grown into organised drug-dealing enterprises. Their feud culminated in the 2003 New Year's shootings of two teenage girls, Letitia Shakespeare and Charlene Ellis, tragic victims caught in a machine gun ambush carried out by Burger Bar gangsters trying to kill Johnson Crew members. The public outrage from that incident forced a major police crackdown, resulting in multiple gang members getting life sentences. Yet despite those blows, neither gang was fully eliminated. Over the past 5 years, Birmingham's gang scene has splintered but remains as violent as ever. Authorities estimate around 40 local gangs are active in the city, engaged in turf warfare that caused an explosion in street violence in recent years. Many of these are splinter factions or younger offshoots of the original Burger Bar Boys and Johnson Crew networks. Groups with names like 23 Drillers, 247 365, Frankly Killers, and 61 Gang operate in various districts, but they often trace lineage back to the Burger-Johnson divide. The drug trade, particularly heroin and crack distribution, is the engine of these gangs. A police source noted that even after high-profile arrests, the gangs adapt quickly. A large bust interrupted the heroin and crack supply in one area of Northampton for only 2 hours before the network reorganized. This illustrates how deeply entrenched and resilient these Birmingham gang networks are. Today, the Burger Bar Boys still exist and exert influence, as evidenced by recent incidents. In 2022, 6 men linked to the Burger Bar Boys were hit with court injunctions, banning orders, after a violent brawl in a Birmingham bar. Around the same time, a daylight shooting of a suspected Burger Bar member drew police attention, and intelligence identified several extremely violent splinter gangs in Birmingham, aligned to either the Burger Bar or Johnson legacies. These modern incarnations continue to carry firearms, handguns and shotguns are frequently seized, and knives, contributing to the West Midlands' high rates of knife and gun crime. In response, West Midlands Police doubled their organised crime unit manpower in Birmingham and have conducted multiple operations to seize guns and drugs. One such case in late 2023 saw officers recover a revolver and ammunition from gang members tied to these groups. Both the Burger Bar Boys and Johnson Crew have also been involved in county lines drug supply, extending their violence to smaller towns. Senior members, those not already in prison or dead, maintain low profiles, often using teenagers to do their dirty work. While they may no longer engage in open warfare like the 2000s, the legacy of fear remains. Any flare-up between these factions can trigger shootings or stabbings, as recently as summer 2022. In the eyes of Birmingham residents and law enforcement, the names Burger Bar Boys and Johnson Crew are synonymous with gangland brutality, a menace that, though evolved, still holds the city in a grip of violence and intimidation in 2025. Sliding into number 6 is Manchester's infamous Gooch Close Gang, often simply called the Gooch. Founded on the tough Alexandra Park estate in Moss Side in the 1980s, the Gooch Gang became one of England's most feared urban gangs. This crew, primarily of Afro-Caribbean heritage, was at the centre of Manchester's Gunchester era, where gang gun wars led to the city's highest ever gun crime rates. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, the Gooch feuded violently with the Doddington Gang, also known as the Pepper Hill Mob, over control of drug turf in South Manchester. Those years saw regular drive-by shootings and murders. Gooch leaders gained notoriety for their ruthless tactics, including kidnapping and torture of rivals. In 2009, a major police operation convicted several top Gooch members, including leaders Colin Joyce and Lee Amos, for murder, effectively crippling the gang's leadership at the time. However, Gooch was not eradicated. With over 250 members at its height, many lower-ranking members remained on the streets, and the gang's drug-dealing networks endured. In the past 5 years, the Gooch Close Gang's presence is still felt in Manchester's underworld, albeit in a reorganized form. Detectives describe Gooch today as a shadow of its former self in terms of structure, but remnants of the gang continue to engage in serious crime. For instance, in 2019, Greater Manchester Police foiled a firearms conspiracy involving individuals strongly associated with the Gooch Gang. Undercover officers tracked a crew trying to purchase and distribute a sawn-off shotgun to use in turf attacks. Armed police intercepted the deal and recovered the weapon before it could be used. This incident showed that Gooch-affiliated criminals still have access to guns and are actively plotting violence, even after decades of police pressure. The gang remains heavily involved in drug trafficking, controlling street-level distribution of crack cocaine, heroin and cannabis in Moss Side and surrounding neighborhoods. They have also been linked to extortion and taxing of smaller drug dealers. The Gooch Gang's alliances and rivalries have evolved. Historically allied with other South Manchester sets and even the Cheetham Hill Gang from North Manchester, Gooch members now face threats from newer gangs and former protégés. Internal disputes have occasionally flared into violence. Meanwhile, their old enemy, the Doddington Gang, still exists in some avatar, meaning the potential for conflict persists. Manchester police have attributed several recent shootings and tit-for-tat attacks to lingering tensions between Gooch and rival factions in South Manchester. Yet the Gooch name still carries weight. It is a byword for organised gang crime in Manchester. Community members report that young gangsters invoke the Gooch legacy to instill fear. This gang's durability, surviving leadership changes and crackdowns, underscores why it ranks among England's most dangerous. With guns hidden away and drug money fueling them, the Gooch Close Gang remains a menace. The city of Manchester, now with advanced surveillance and dedicated gang units, keeps a wary eye on Moss Side, hoping to prevent the next cycle of bloodshed that the Gooch could unleash if left unchecked. At number 5, we turn to Sulford, Greater Manchester, and the A-Team, a gang whose recent war with a breakaway faction plunged the area into chaos. The A-Team is an organised crime group rooted in Sulford's Ordsall and Swinton districts. It was once led by figures like Stephen Britton and was closely associated with veteran Sulford Mr. Big Paul Massey. The gang's name, ironically similar to the 1980s TV show, belies the deadly serious nature of its operations. Drug trafficking, armed robberies, extortion and violence. In the mid-2010s, the A-Team's dominance in Sulford was challenged by former allies turned rivals, mockingly dubbed the Anti-A-Team. This split sparked a ferocious gangland feud between the two factions. Police described it as a gang war that from 2014 to 2018 involved at least 2 murders, 7 shootings, and a string of retaliatory attacks. Reminiscent of the worst days of Gunchester. The feud's most high-profile victims were the A-Team's own one-time boss, Paul Massey, and his associate, Liverpool enforcer John Kinsella. Massey, a notorious crime boss, was shot dead with an Uzi submachine gun outside his home in July 2015, a shocking assassination carried out by a hitman linked to the Anti-A faction. 3 years later, in 2018, the same hitman ambushed and murdered Kinsella as well. These brazen killings demonstrated the lengths Sulford gangsters would go to eliminate rivals. During this period, the residential streets of Sulford were rocked by grenade attacks. One grenade was thrown at an A-Team member's house in 2015. Drive-by shootings, and even incidents where a 7-year-old boy and his mother were shot in the legs as collateral damage in the feud. The community was terrified into silence. Police investigations were hampered by a wall of silence due to fear of reprisals. Eventually, Greater Manchester Police and the National Crime Agency poured resources into dismantling these gangs. In 2019, hitman Mark Fellows, nicknamed the Iceman, and an accomplice were convicted and given life sentences, which marked the end of the most violent chapter of the war. However, the A-Team gang is not entirely gone. Several members of both the A-Team and the Anti-A faction who weren't killed or jailed remain at large, and they still control criminal rackets in Sulford and beyond. The A-Team in particular had built lucrative drug supply lines, cocaine and cannabis, and had fingers in pies like nightclub security and loan sharking. Even after the decapitation of its leadership, intelligence reports suggest Sulford's underworld has reorganized rather than disappeared. police maintain a focus on Sulford, conducting weapons sweeps and drug busts to keep the pressure on the A-team's remnants. In late 2022 and 2023, multiple Sulford men linked to gang activity were arrested with firearms and large quantities of drugs, indicating the enterprise is ongoing. Fear still lingers on the streets. The memory of how the A-team handled snitches, reports of kidnapping and machete attacks abound, means witnesses are scarce. The rivalry between factions has cooled under police scrutiny, but personal animosities run deep. Any spark, an assault, an insult, a dispute over drug turf could ignite Sulford's powder keg once more. The A-team's recent history of 4 years of bloodshed and underworld notoriety secures its rank among the most dangerous gangs in England. It stands as a grim example of a regional gang whose internecine conflict brought murder and mayhem to residential communities, with effects still felt today. Moving to the higher echelons of organized crime, number 4 on our list is the Huyton Firm, a Liverpool-based drug cartel known for its secrecy, wealth, and ruthlessness. Unlike street gangs comprised of youths, the Huyton Firm is an elite-level criminal enterprise run by 2 brothers from Huyton, a suburb of Liverpool. They first emerged in the late 1990s, filling the power vacuum left when Liverpool's previous drug lord, Curtis "Cocky" Warren, was jailed. Over the past 2 decades, these brothers have quietly built an international narcotics empire, trafficking massive quantities of cocaine, heroin, and other drugs into the UK. Police sources say the Huyton duo operate on a different level compared to typical Merseyside criminals. In fact, Britain's National Crime Agency, NCA, has been trying and failing to convict them for over 20 years. The Huyton Firm's modus operandi is sophisticated and low-key. In the late 90s, the bosses relocated to Spain's Costa del Sol, using the Iberian Peninsula as a strategic hub to import drugs from Latin America and Morocco. They forged ties with Irish cartels, Dutch wholesalers, North African smugglers, and even Eastern European mobs to facilitate their trade. Enforcers recruited from Liverpool were sent to Spain to protect shipments and, if necessary, engage in violent competition with rival traffickers. Despite this international footprint, the gang kept a notoriously low profile, eschewing the flashy violence that draws media attention. Locally in Liverpool, they have employed networks of street gangs, like those mentioned earlier, to distribute drugs on the ground. By maintaining a buffer of intermediaries, the Huyton bosses insulated themselves from day-to-day street crimes and focused on large-scale importation and money laundering. This strategy has frustrated law enforcement, as direct evidence against the brothers has been hard to obtain. A senior detective once lamented that these men shun publicity and seem almost untouchable, evading serious prosecution even as their product floods British streets. However, danger follows the Huyton Firm's operations. Their immense drug profits. Some estimates suggest they built a fortune comparable to Warren's, who had $300 million at his peak. Fund teams of loyal foot soldiers ready to employ violence. There have been whispers in the underworld of the Huyton Firm ordering assassinations and assaults to protect their interests, both in the UK and on the Costa del Sol. In one case, Spanish police linked Liverpudlian criminals in Marbella to a series of kidnappings and shootings, suspected to be connected to British gangs vying over drug routes, likely involving the Huyton Firm or their partners. Back in Merseyside, this firm has kept local gangs in line through both the carrot, lucrative drug supply deals, and the stick, violent retribution if crossed. One can draw a line from their global trafficking down to turf wars on Liverpool's estates. The big boys make the deals, and it's up to the kids to shift them. Those kids are the ones in our number 10 entry and others. The recent crackdown on encrypted phone networks, such as the EncroChat bust in 2020, did lead to some middlemen associated with the Huyton Firm being arrested, offering glimpses into the operation. Yet, as of 2025, the reputed heads of the Huyton Firm remain free. This crime family's uncanny ability to evade law enforcement, its extensive international connections, and its control over a huge share of Britain's drug and gun trade make it extraordinarily dangerous. It has the wealth to corrupt officials and the will to employ violence when needed, all while remaining in the shadows. For For these reasons, the Huyton Firm stands as one of England's top crime groups, illustrating the cartel of Liverpudlian traffickers that runs the show outside of London. Their influence is a key reason Liverpool is considered a major hub in the national and international crime landscape. At number 3 is an organised crime group so feared and powerful that police once described its boss as too big to bring down, the Hunt Syndicate. Centred in East London, notably Canning Town and Essex, the Hunt Syndicate is led by David Hunt, a 6'5" gangster nicknamed Longfella. Hunt and his brothers began their empire in the 1980s, and over the past 40-plus years, they have built an extensive criminal network. The syndicate's activities span violence, fraud, prostitution, money laundering, and murder. They've been involved in everything from drug trafficking and extortion rackets to large-scale VAT fraud and property scams. What makes the Hunt Syndicate particularly notorious is the allegation of systemic corruption. A leaked police dossier, Operation Tiberius, in the early 2000s indicated that Hunt's gang had infiltrated or bribed elements within law enforcement, helping them evade prosecution for years. It was even revealed that a $1 million contract was put out to assassinate police officers who were investigating the syndicate. A shocking measure of how dangerous this group is willing to be. David Hunt's outfit has been compared to the old Cray twins firm, but arguably the Hunt Syndicate surpassed the Crays in reach and longevity. In the 1990s and 2000s, they controlled nightclubs, security firms, and waste management companies, some of which were used as fronts for illegal activities in London and Essex. Their territory included parts of East London's Docklands, the Essex outskirts, and even London's West End, Soho, where they took over rackets once run by earlier crime families. The gang is essentially a family business, with Hunt's relatives and close associates holding key positions. Violence has always been a tool for them. One judge, in a 2013 libel case, described Hunt as a violent and dangerous criminal and the head of an organized crime group. Intimidation of witnesses is routine. Many potential informants have stayed silent out of fear of the syndicate's reach. There are infamous stories. One of Hunt's former enforcers was rumored to have been disposed of in a gruesome fashion. Though never confirmed, it speaks to the gang's feared reputation. In the past 5 years, the Hunt Syndicate remains a potent force, albeit more in the background. David Hunt himself, now in his early 60s, keeps a low public profile. He did appear in headlines for unsuccessfully suing the Sunday Times for libel when they exposed his criminal status, a case that backfired and further cemented his reputation in print as an underworld king. Law enforcement agencies, including the NCA, continue to monitor the syndicate's activities. In 2021, authorities scrutinized the Hunt Syndicate's possible role in large-scale cocaine importations via ports in the southeast of England, leveraging their long-standing contacts and businesses in shipping and trucking. While some of their operations have been disrupted, for example, a couple of Hunt's lieutenants were convicted on separate charges of fraud and money laundering in recent years, the core leadership appears intact. The syndicate's allies include other major UK and international gangs. They've been known to cooperate with Turkish Cypriot gangs and even the Italian Mafia, indirectly, for mutual profit. For the people living in the Hunt Syndicate's shadow, whether it's East London locals aware of who really runs the neighbourhood, or legitimate businesses coerced into paying taxes, the threat is real. This is organised crime at the highest level, entwined with legitimate society. The combination of wealth, influence, violence, and corruption surrounding the Hunt Syndicate makes it one of the most dangerous criminal organisations in England. It's a crime empire that so far has largely evaded the fate of lesser gangs, continuing to operate where others have been shut down. As of 2025, it stands as a testament to how deeply rooted and formidable an English crime firm can become. At number 2, we examine the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate, better known by the surname of its leading trio, the Addams family, sometimes called the A-Team, no relation to the Sulford gang, or the Addams family. This North London organisation is often referred to as Britain's own mafia. For over 3 decades, the Addams brothers, Terry, Patrick, Patsy, and Tommy Addams, presided over a sprawling crime empire based out of the Clerkenwell district. At their height, They were reportedly worth over £200 million and linked to at least 25 murders. Scotland Yard once dubbed Terry Adams the British Godfather, and police sources have said the Adams family makes the Cray twins look like minnows by comparison. Their syndicate has been involved in drug trafficking, cannabis, ecstasy, cocaine, large-scale heists, counterfeiting, extortion rackets, and contract killings. Uniquely, the Adamses were known to rent out their feared name to other gangs for a hefty fee, so others could claim Adams affiliation to intimidate rivals. That is how feared this family became in the UK underworld. The Clerkenwell Syndicate's origin story goes back to the 1980s in Islington, where the Irish-descended Adams brothers started in protection rackets and armed robbery. By the early 1990s, they muscled into London's drug market, forging contacts with Colombian cartels and European traffickers to import tons of narcotics. They also reputedly laundered money through businesses and even high-end art antique collections. The brothers ran their organization with a code of loyalty and a willingness to permanently silence anyone who betrayed them. Famously, a former enforcer who fell out of favor was rumored to have been killed and embedded in concrete under the Millennium Dome construction. A story that, true or not, illustrates the mythology around their ruthlessness. Throughout the 90s, they eliminated competitors, like the Riley family from Islington, and even had run-ins with old-school gangsters. In 1991, an Adams gunman allegedly shot and wounded Mad Frankie Fraser, an associate of the rival Richardson gang, in a turf dispute. Law enforcement's major breakthrough came in the 2000s when MI5 and police surveillance finally nailed Terry Adams on money laundering, since witnesses were too frightened to testify on violent crimes. Terry was jailed in 2007, then released in 2010. His brothers have also served time, Tommy for firearm offences, Patsy fled to the Netherlands for a period after a shooting incident. As of the last few years, Terry Adams, now in his late 60s, has kept a low profile under strict serious crime prevention orders. But while the leadership went somewhat quiet, the Clerkenwell Syndicate is believed to still operate through intermediaries. Police and the press believe the Adams family invested much of their fortune into legitimate businesses and offshore accounts, providing financial clout to influence the underworld without open violence. Nevertheless, there have been signs of activity. In the mid-2010s, Patsy Adams was convicted for shooting a rival in broad daylight, an echo of the old ways, demonstrating that the Adams crew will still resort to brutality to settle scores. Associates of the Adams family remain key players in drug importation and distribution in London. It's thought that the syndicate still has a stake in the cocaine trade and other rackets, sometimes behind fronts or in partnership with other gangs. They've reportedly cooperated with Irish and Albanian groups when convenient. Despite some calling them semi-retired, the Adams family influence lingers at the top tier of British crime. Their name alone still carries a currency in the underworld. Even post-incarceration, Terry Adams was caught violating financial disclosure rules, suggesting hidden assets and ongoing shady dealings. The fear they instilled has meant that informants are rare. As one police source remarked, no one has ratted because they know life wouldn't be worth living if they crossed the Adams clan. For their unmatched criminal pedigree and the continuing, if quieter, hold they have over organised crime in London, the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate stands near the pinnacle of England's most dangerous gangs. They represent an old-school crime dynasty that, even as it's been partially dismantled by law enforcement, remains a spectre over the British underworld in 2025. Topping our list at number 1 are the Albanian Mafia networks in England, epitomised by the East London gang known as Albanians. In recent years, Albanian organised crime groups have risen to dominate large portions of England's drug trade, wielding a mix of commercial savvy and raw violence that has unsettled even long-time gangsters. Centred in London, with hubs in cities like Birmingham and Manchester as well, the Albanians have effectively seized control of the UK's lucrative cocaine market, an industry valued around £5 billion. The Albanians crew, based on the Gascoigne estate in Barking, East London, is the most visible tip of this iceberg. They serve as street-level enforcers and dealers for the wider Mafia Shqiptare, Albanian Mafia. Locally, Albanians gained notoriety for their flamboyant displays on social media, posting videos and photos with Ferraris, stacks of $50 notes, and gold Rolexes, essentially taunting authorities while recruiting young members with promises of fast cash. But behind the bling is a vicious organization that is ready for violence, as their drill rap videos brag, complete with menacing firearms displays. The rise of the Albanian gangs is a relatively recent phenomenon, exploding in the 2010s. After establishing footholds in London's drug scene, the Albanians disrupted the status quo by cutting out middlemen. They negotiated directly with Colombian cartels, importing high-purity cocaine at prices far below what domestic gangs were paying. This bold strategy allowed them to flood the UK with cheaper, purer cocaine, undercutting competitors and rapidly expanding their market share. British crime experts note that Albanian traffickers essentially reorganized the cocaine trade in Britain in their favor. With profits soaring, they brought in more manpower from abroad, often ex-military or clan-connected individuals, and armed themselves heavily. The National Crime Agency warned that Albanian crime groups were consolidating power and nearing a total takeover of the UK cocaine trade. Helbanians, as a key faction, controls its turf in East London with an iron fist. The Gascoigne estate is their stronghold, described as undisputed territory, where outsiders, including journalists, are warned away under threat. They are known for using brutal enforcement tactics, shootings, kidnappings, and reported incidents of beheadings or torture, usually kept within the criminal world and thus less publicized, to send messages. In 2017, a chilling example of their reach occurred when an Albanian gang murder in London led to retaliatory killings back in Albania, highlighting how these networks operate transnationally and with vendetta principles. Their allies span overseas, including ties to the Italian 'Ndrangheta and Turkish gangs. Yet in the UK, they've also muscled into traditional British gang territory. London's East End, once dominated by local firms, now sees Albanians coexisting or pushing out local gangs. They've clashed at times with Turkish Cypriot drug gangs and other Eastern European groups, but more often Albanians co-opt or outcompete rather than engage in street wars. A police operation in 2019, Project Escalade, seized dozens of firearms and huge drug stashes linked to Albanian gangs, showing both the scale of their arsenal and the focus law enforcement now places on them. Despite arrests, Albanian gangs prove difficult to uproot. Their structure is decentralized and clan-based, which makes infiltrating them hard. Helbanians members, for instance, often report to higher-ups not even based in the UK. And while Helbanians' social media bravado brought attention, and some members faced arrest after flaunting illegal wealth online, other Albanian syndicates learned to keep a lower profile. What remains consistent is their willingness to use extreme violence to protect their enterprise. The Guardian noted that Helbanians' videos served as both warning and recruitment, reminding viewers that HB are ready for violence whenever necessary. This capacity for brutal enforcement ensures that local distributors and rival gangs think twice before crossing them. On the streets of London and beyond, Albanian dealers are now deeply embedded, from high-end nightclub cocaine supply rings to street-level county lines operations. Their dominance in drugs has also led to spikes in firearm availability and use. Police have linked increased gun seizures in London partly to turf spats involving Albanian groups. In summary, the Albanian Mafia in England, personified by gangs like Helbanians, currently stands as the most active and dangerous gang entity in the nation. They combine international drug trafficking clout with domestic terror on the streets. As of 2025, they sit atop the pyramid of organized crime, wealthy, merciless, and expanding. Law enforcement insiders acknowledge the Albanians' remarkable rise and the challenge they pose, as these gangs continue to deliver cocaine and mayhem in equal measure. For these reasons, the Albanian networks take the #1 spot on this countdown. England's underworld has a new kingpin, and it speaks Albanian, wielding a fearsome reputation that even other veteran crime families have come to respect or fear. Each of these gangs, from the streets of Liverpool and London to the shadows of international cartels, contributes to a dangerous criminal landscape in England. While the authorities continuously strive to dismantle them, these groups have shown a chilling ability to adapt and survive. Understanding their origins, operations, and rivalries is not just an exercise in morbid curiosity, but a necessary step in confronting the violence and crime they inflict on communities. This has been our investigative countdown of the top 10 most active and perilous gangs in England as of 2025, a sobering look at organized crime that lurks beneath the surface of everyday life. Stay safe, and thank you for watching.